Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan, and I'm a senior product manager on the XD team. I've been with Adobe for the last 5 years, and I started my journey at Adobe as a designer. So I was a part of the design team at Adobe, working on web tools and services. And then I recently joined the product team on the XD side 2 years back.
My name is Anirudh. I'm an engineer on the XD team, and I've been working with XD since day one. I'm super passionate about design. I am not a designer, and I think that's the reason why I love making design tools, because it's like so painful for me that I can't design, that I need to make tools and see you guys build cool stuff.
And quick little note, Anirudh was a part of the 4-person team that actually started XD 4 years back. So he was a part of the original team that actually built the very first prototype of XD before it was even a thing. All right, so with that said, we've got a packed session today. And before we get into the session, I just wanted to set some context as to how we are building XD and how we are approaching prototyping and everything else we are doing. I think when we ask ourselves as designers and as creatives, what do you do? Like, what kind of a designer are you? And if you asked this question a couple of years ago, there were two sort of categories of buckets that you sort of put yourself into. It was either print or it was web and mobile. But things have changed over the last couple of years. And what's happened is screens. So the medium that we've been designing for, that we've sort of trained ourselves for, print and mobile, they've exploded. You've got screens of different sizes on different types of devices, and you can't even keep up with the density of these mediums anymore. So we spoke about screens, we spoke about pixels. The other thing was how the input mechanisms. So we've traditionally designed for print and web where things like click, hover, those are the things we worried about. But touch became an integral part of the experiences we started to design for. And voice is just another addition to that. So with the addition of touch, it became even more important to think about how we design, the mediums we design for. And then this concept of everything being omnipresent, it being on the cloud, being connected, being able to hand off from one device to another device. All of these things have tremendously impacted the way we design and what we design for. And today, when you look at the spectrum of things, we as designers and as creatives need to be, need to be aware of or need to build our skills and learn to design for. It's a broad spectrum. We started with desktops. We focused on web. We always focused on mobile. But now you have wearables. Those screens are so much more smaller. The challenges of touch and voice with those screens is a completely different ball game. Then we are looking at a whole new range of devices that are powered by vision. It taps into a completely different input and a different sort of experience altogether. And then voice. How many of you were pumped up about the voice features in XD? Yeah, I mean, this was exciting for us. And, as a part of building XD, we are not just focusing on what designers and creatives are doing today. We are thinking about 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. Where are we going with, this platform we are building? What is the kind of work designers want to do? What are the things they can't do today? And voice is just one of those many things that we want to enable you to do. But there's still so much more. There's AI, there's machine learning. As designers, how do we even get into areas like this? How do you even prototype for machine learning or artificial intelligence? So when we think of XD, we're really thinking of the whole spectrum of experiences that we want to create as designers. But here's what happened. With the evolution of this process, when you go back a couple of years and you ask a designer, hey, what do you do on the team? They would say things like, I'm an interaction designer. I'm a user experience designer. I'm a product designer. I'm a graphic designer. And what that really represented was the fragmentation of the entire design process. Different individuals played different roles. We came together as a team. We sort of filled in for each other. Uh, you specialized in certain things. Prototyping was not something that every designer could do. You had specific, wow, did I just get loud? Uh, you had specific individuals who would specialize in prototyping. They knew specific types of tools. They knew how to do things that others couldn't. So the whole process was set up in a way where each one had different roles, different responsibilities, used different tools, but it all came together. And what has happened over the last couple of years is this process has changed. Design is no longer static, nor does it happen in isolation. So, in turn, the process has changed and it's really influenced the roles that we play as designers. As designers today, you're expected to be able to bring your designs to life, at least get it to a stage where it feels realistic, be more expressive with what you're putting together. And these roles, the change in the roles, the responsibilities, has, has forced designers to really look out for new tools, to empower themselves with new skills that they never imagined they would have to learn. And in turn, all of these, the evolution of the design process, the evolution of the role of a designer, they've actually created this revolution of tools. I think this year we've seen the most number of screen design and prototyping tools surface. And it's a good thing. It means we have more options than we ever did to pick and use what makes the most sense for us. But this is the mission, this is the challenge that sort of gets us excited for XD. When we think of this, we think of how do we empower all of y'all to design for experiences that you never imagined, to give you the ability to do things that you never imagined you could do. Voice is just an example of that today. But we won't be stopping at voice. There's a lot more we've been thinking about. And you'll see all of that, materialize over the next 1 year. And in fact, beyond that as well. So with that, just a very quick overview of what I plan to cover today. So for the session, it's going to be interactive. I want to take you through the journey of all the features we have with prototyping. I want to show you how you can use these to your best advantage. Some pro tips, some quick examples of like things that people have created. Anirudh's going to also hop in and show you some real world use cases, which are examples of how you would use these features. Think of them as case studies to understand when would you use a fixed element, when would you use an overlay, when would you use a specific type of easing function. So we're going to go through all the different features in XD. Then we're going to look at a couple of case studies. And I want to save some time for Q&A. And then I want to make sure all of y'all have enough time to get to the general session, because that's going to be awesome today. And then the bash later today. The bash is going to be awesome as well. If this is your first Max, make sure you go for the Max bash. Trust me, you won't regret it. Anirudh.
So yeah, my challenge as an engineer is that when designers, our lead designer for XD was Talent, he'd have this vision, and it's super hard to translate that into an actual product. He'd have animations, he'd have all sorts of interactions happening. This is the XD prototype, a clip of the XD prototype, minus some features that I wanted to hide from long ago. And you can see that it's super different from what we have actually shipped, but this is what we used to sell the idea of XD inside Adobe. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's hard to do. Like, how do you show a resize is happening? How do you convey what animation you want to apply? All that stuff. So when Jonathan talks about case studies, I'll be looking at realistic cases and very unrealistic cases, just to keep things a little fun.
When Anirudh shows, like whenever he presents this one image, it's always so inspiring to think of the fact that at one point in time, XD was a prototype as well. We didn't know where we were going with it when we started, right? We built so many prototypes, we experimented so much, we iterated so much, and today it's crazy. When I look at the design team that's behind XD, every time we build a new feature, guess which tool we are using to design all of this? We design XD inside of XD. So quite often we'll have a design of the property inspector, the panel on the right, and we've added a bunch of new features. And then while the designer's going through the mockups, they'll be clicking on the actual design and going, it's not working. It's like, no, that's your design. Like, zoom out, the PI is on the right.
So, continuing my promise of interrupting Jonathan with unrealistic animations, this is what I built as an engineer, the animation for the slides.
Oh yeah, one of the things we didn't highlight in the keynote was, Anirudh, let's play that once more. Watch this. So one of the things you could do with auto-animate is actually animate vector paths. So you could literally take two completely different icons, make sure they have the same layer name, use auto-animate, and we'll magically animate them for you. So we'll get into this. I don't want to like steal Anirudh's thunder right now, but there's a lot of fun stuff in this. All right, so before we get started, wow, that yellow is really bright. How many of you are familiar with XD? Okay, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. All right. Now, keep your hand up if you've prototyped with it earlier. Okay, good. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to take you through some of the initial basics and then bring you all into some of the features we have with it. So if you haven't noticed, it's one single app for design, prototyping, and sharing, right? Which means you no longer need to jump between different applications, install additional plugins just to prototype. So here I have my design surface. You can see I'm going to be referring to this section as the property inspector, and the left-hand side as my toolbar. So you can see in the design mode, I have my property inspector on the right. And when I switch to prototyping, it goes away. Now don't worry, we don't need the property inspector in prototyping mode yet. I'm going to show you how you actually get started with prototyping. So what I've done here is I've put together a bunch of designs for this project in design mode. If I zoom out, you can actually see the scale of this project. It's got a lot of artboards. It's got all my wireframes, my mobile screens. And then watch this, like wow. Panning and zooming, not moving the whole app frame. It's smooth, like there's no lag. The app does not struggle to manage this scale of projects. And in fact, every single screen out here, what I forgot to mention at the start was, it actually has 4K images right from stock. I haven't even downsized a single image for this document. So I downloaded these images from stock, dropped them into XD, just kept working with it, worked with several artboards, still no issues. So that's actually a big part of how we are building XD. Everything you'll see today is super high performance, a lot of attention to detail, and really focusing on the quality of the experience with the app. So let's get started. So here I have a design that I put together. And as a designer now, I want to explain the flow of this app. So in order to do this, traditionally, we've relied on different tools. And we've created hotspots, and we wired up the hotspots to different parts of my design. But with XD, this entire process is really, really simple. So even in the prototype mode, you still have access to each and every individual layer. So what I can now do is go ahead, select an object. I'm going to switch to prototype mode first. So I'm going to select an object, and you can see in prototype mode, I get this little blue knob. Can you see it back there? Okay. So when I click on this knob, I can actually drag a wire out from here. And then I can connect it to my destination artboard. And this could be any artboard, not just one, any artboard. So I'm going to connect it to this screen. Now, the minute I do that, I get this little pop-up with a bunch of options. So let's look at what these options are. So starting from the top, you've got your triggers. And we'll deep dive into what these triggers are as we progress. But at a very high level, you've got a couple of triggers out here. You've got tap, you've got drag, and you've got voice. However, instead of an object, if you select the entire artboard, then you'll notice you get one additional type of trigger called time. So time is the only trigger that works at the artboard level, but all the other triggers work at the object level. And you'll see why. It wasn't something we didn't want to give you at the object level. It just makes a lot of sense to have time go at an artboard level. Now, let's undo this. Oops. I never practiced doing this with just one hand. So, all right, so we've got this, we connected it, we looked at triggers. Let's look at action. So once you define a trigger, once you define how does someone interact, you need to define an outcome. We know the destination, but we need to know what you want to do. So by default, it's a transition, which means it will just go from screen A to screen B. However, we have a whole bunch of new options here. So the first one is transition, which is something everyone's familiar with. If you've used Keynote, PowerPoint, these are regular transitions. Then we look at auto-animate, which is where all the magic happens. Then we'll also look at the other one called overlays, speech playback, and previous artboard. So you've got a bunch of options that we're going to go through. And then in animation, you have some very basic animations to support those transitions, like sliding, pushing left, pushing up, pushing down. And then after that, you've got easing functions, and then you've got your duration control. And we'll go into all of these into detail. So here's a quick example of how you wire stuff up. So I'm going to go ahead, pick transition. You notice it's automatically picked up my destination because I connected the wire. But you could always go ahead, pick an artboard from this drop-down if you wanted to. But it's just easier to do this visually so that you know how you're building up your flow. Then I'm going to pick, let's say we pick slide right. And then I'm going to change the duration to 0.6. Once that's done, there's one important thing you got to do at this point. You've got to define where does your prototype start from. So every artboard, if you click on the title, you see this home icon in the top left corner. If you click on the home icon, that sets the artboard as the starting point for you. And that's important because that helps us understand what is the starting point of your flow. So I've gone ahead, I've done this. Now the next obvious question is, how do I check, how do I preview all of this? So to do that, you've got a preview option in the top right corner. You click on that. I bring this up here. And now you can see when I click, it actually transitions the way I defined it from the first artboard to the second artboard. Very basic example. But this gives you an idea of how you can actually wire up an entire document. You can basically define the flow for your entire prototype just by connecting them through wires. You don't have to draw arrows anymore. And now the next question is, well, this is great, but how do I share this with someone? Like, if I want to show this flow to someone, what are my options? So here's your first option. One of the things we focused on with building XD was a platform where you don't have to switch back and forth between different tools. So you could simply go ahead, click on the share button out here. I'm going to go ahead and say publish prototype. And over here, what I can do is pick a couple of options, like, do I want to password protect this? Or do I want to do something specific like allow comments or hide comments? And then I'm going to click on generate a new link. And what this is going to do is it's instantly going to create a URL for me that I can share with anyone to view my prototype. So here I have the prototype. I'm going to copy this link. Where's my browser? Oh, there we go. And then, once this loads, you will be able to see this prototype right there inside the browser. And the same interactions work in the browser as well. So gone are the days where you had to export it as a video, upload it to a file sharing service, then get feedback over email, get messages over Slack, figure out a way to collect all of that, make changes, re-upload, re-zip, get feedback. Like, this is a painful process. We've all gone through this. But the beauty of XD is all of this is now integrated as one single flow. So you could go through your entire review process right inside this prototype, get all the feedback, decide you want to make these changes, go back into XD, and then make your changes, and then simply click on update. This is such a small feature. Why are they playing music? This is such a small feature, but it's so powerful because when you think of it, you're building a prototype, you shared a link with someone, you decide you want to make changes. You don't have to like struggle to find, oh, what's that link I emailed the person, or like, where is that link? Just hit update, and the same link is refreshed with your changes. So you actually get control over what version, or like at what stage of your progress are you actually sharing it with your designers, developers, or stakeholders. But let's say you change the prototype completely, or you're too embarrassed of your first version, you can simply hit new link, and that would create a completely new link for you. So you have the options of sharing this as a web prototype, but we don't just stop there. So one of the things that I'm not going to cover today is around the mobile apps. We do support an iOS app and an Android app, which means you could connect it via USB and simply preview all of this in real time. And that's a really cool way of actually user testing. So we actually seen a lot of customers create prototypes in XD, use the USB cable, plug it in, bring it up on an actual device, and then just hand it over to someone and say, hey, can you just try out this example, like this app? They don't even realize it's a prototype because it seems so realistic. And you can actually turn off the hotspot hints on the mobile app, making it really easy to user test. So it doesn't give away, what are the triggers inside your prototype. So that's another way of sharing. And then the last thing I want to highlight is when you preview this inside the preview window, you notice we've got a little record icon on the top. So that allows you to actually start a screen recording of the preview window, which means you can actually click through your whole prototype and record that entire experience as a video, MP4. And once it's an MP4, basically you have control over what you want to do with it. You want to make it a GIF, you want to upload it somewhere, all of that is totally possible. Oh, one last thing. I actually forgot about this when we were talking about share. You do also have the option of embedding your prototypes on Behance. So you get the embed code that you could pretty much embed anywhere on your website. So that's another option of sort of taking your prototypes and taking it outside the XD experience. So here I'm just going to show you a quick overview of how crazy you can actually get with your designs. So here's an example of where I've actually wired up an entire flow together right inside of XD. Okay, so with that context of how you wire different artboards, how you wire different objects, let's look at some of the new features we have. All right, should we start with overlays first?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So imagine you had to do something like this, where you had to create a screen and explain to your stakeholders or your designers that when you click on the icon in the top left, this menu slides down and it looks really beautiful, and it's got this background blur and you can see through it. And it's a lot of jazz hands and talking, right? Like you got static images and you got to do all of this. There's no way to really be expressive. So for a really long time in XD, you had to do something like this. So you would duplicate the artboard, create the menu on top of it, then switch over to prototype mode, drag a wire, and then I would do something like dissolve, and I would make this 0.2 seconds, so it's so fast. And I'll probably do none because I wanted to feel like it actually just popped up. And I'll be like, look at how amazing this is. Like it's got a menu that slides from the top. But it's not as realistic as you want it to be. You have to, really explain what your intent is. So while we build features on XD, we think of tasks like these. We look out for opportunities where it represents a lot of friction or several steps in the design process for you. So this brings me to the very first feature I want to talk about, which is called overlays. Now, quick show of hands. Have you used overlays in XD? Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you what overlays is. So here I have an example of the same thing. I'm going to get rid of this wire. What I'm going to do is I've created the menu on a completely different artboard. So there's nothing special about this. I've just drawn the menu on a different artboard, and then I've cropped the artboard to the size of the menu. That's about it. But now, what I'm going to do is go ahead, select the menu icon. Going to drag a wire, if I can magically do that with one hand. Bring it to the overlay artboard, drop that there. Okay, first things first. What's my trigger? It's tap. Fine, let's move on. Action. So in action, I have a new option called overlay. So I'm going to go ahead and select overlay. And the minute I do that, if you notice the base artboard, the artboard I started with, it's got this green knob. I can actually go ahead, click on this thing, and adjust the position. And what it's actually doing is giving me a preview of the overlay on the base artboard itself. So here you can see why I actually cropped the menu artboard, so that it allows me to actually position it the way I want. So I'm going to position it at the top, and then keep this here. I'm going to go back to this and going to look at some of the other properties. So now, in terms of animation, I really want this to slide down. So I'm going to go ahead and say slide down. And then I want the easing to be, let's go with snap. Snap is one of the newest easing functions we introduced. And it's not just a regular snap. We actually had a bunch of different variations of this, playing with the Bezier curve. And we picked, we actually fine-tuned what snap looks like in XD. So I'm going to go ahead, change this to 0.4. I've got this here. It's looking good. You notice the wire also has a dash line, which helps you identify when it's a regular transition versus when it's an overlay. So with just this much, I'm going to go ahead, click on the play button. And now, when I click on the menu icon, you can see how the menu actually slides down while keeping the base artboard fixed. So it's the most realistic experience that you can create with overlays. Now, one more small little detail I want to call out. If you notice when this menu slides out, let's do that once more. I'm probably slow it down for you so you can actually see this. I'm going to bump this up to 5 seconds. The slowest menu that you'll ever see. And watch as the menu is sliding down. If you notice, the background blur is rendering in real time. So these are, again, small little details that we've actually spent a lot of time on in XD. Making sure that if your overlay contains opacity or it contains a background blur, that actually renders in real time. So it gives you the most realistic experience inside your prototype. And one last thing. If I decide I want to switch this to, say, slide up, just watch what happens on the base artboard where the green decoration is. I'm going to go back to slide down. It moves up. So XD is actually smart enough to know that if you picked a transition like slide up, it's got to come from the bottom up. Or if you pick slide down, it's got to be from the top to the bottom. So again, taking away that extra step of having to define it, then going and positioning it on your base artboard. So this is just a quick example of overlays. It's a really powerful feature. With the same example, I also have a menu and a keyboard all wired up in this case. So if I go ahead, click on this, the menu pops up. You can see it's got a beautiful little snap easing. If I click on search, it brings up a keyboard from the bottom. But the real power of overlays is when you start thinking of scale. Now imagine if you had a flow where you had to show the keyboard multiple times. That would mean having to duplicate every single screen that requires the keyboard. So if your flow actually had 10 screens, it would now be 20 because you just duplicated so many screens just to show the keyboard. But the beauty of overlays is it takes the concept of reusability and brings it to prototyping. So here if I select the menu, you can see how one menu is now linked across several artboards as an overlay. So it makes it very easy for you to design in one place, but reuse it across your transitions, reuse it across your prototype as many times as you want. With that, I'm just going to briefly stop. Anirudh, do you have something you want to show us with overlays?
Let's do it. So this is one of my favorite samples, the iOS background blur. And if you look at this, the overlay is super simple. If I tap on this, it's going to slide up. You know, when this came out in iOS, I just spent hours just doing this up and down just to look at the background blur. And like Jonathan said, all this stuff renders in real time in XD. So if you actually move the sheen, you can really see what's happening. So you can imagine that you have one notification center exam overlay set up, and all your artboards can use it. So if you were designing iOS at Apple, you could just wire it up once, and from all your prototypes, you'd get this overlay coming in.
All right. So that was the first feature. That was overlays. Do you like this feature? Awesome. Okay. Yes. We got to clap louder than them. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one, which is personally my favorite feature. It's called fixed elements. It's actually funny when we think of what we like this feature. We called it fixed elements. We didn't even know what to call it. We started out with sticky elements.
Yes.
Then what? Fixed header.
There were a lot of iterations.
Yeah, we went through. I think.
Wasn't happy.
Yeah, engineering basically lost their shit on me because I just kept changing the name of this feature. Like we just went over this so many times we couldn't make up our mind. But anyways, it's fixed elements because I said so. So here I have a website, and as you can see, go to my preview window and I'm scrolling. It's perfectly fine, but there's an issue with this. The nav bar on the top is also moving along with the rest of the page. And quite often in screen design, whether it's a website or an app, you have the concept of a fixed header or a fixed footer or like a floating action button or a menu icon. How do you do that in XD? So, with XD, all you have to do is switch over to design mode, select the object. So I'm going to select the nav bar. And then you see this amazing little checkbox that I named Fix Position When Scrolling. And it's so small, but it's so powerful because once you enable that, go back to your preview and watch this. So now as you scroll, the element remains fixed on the top. Now, another small little detail. Yes, thank you. Another small little detail is the background blur and the opacity. This file is so old, no matter how many times I demoed, I just love this example of like the opacity in the nav bar. But yeah, you can see it's rendering in real time. It's really, it allows you to create really expressive interactive prototypes where it's not just like some random clipping of the background, which is like a one-time preview only. Now, this looks great, but even with a small feature like this, we find ways to like spend months on like adding more polish and finding things that we allow you to do that you've never imagined. So, for example, if you've used a feature like this in another prototyping tool, most tools force you to define one fixed header, one fixed footer. With XD, we said, let's remove that barrier. Why can't you fix as many objects as you want? It could be anywhere. So for example, here, I'm going to go ahead. I've got my nav bar that's fixed. I decide I also want to fix some of these objects which are above the viewport. So I'm going to go ahead, fix this. If you notice, I actually have no limit over the number of objects I can assign as a fixed element. So what this gives me is the flexibility to create some really interesting prototypes where more than one object is fixed. So here you can see the brush strokes are also fixed as I'm moving this. Now we said this is amazing because this allows you to really do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. You could have any number of fixed elements on your mobile app. You could have any number of fixed elements on your web page. But again, we didn't stop there. We said, let's make it more fun. So now, when we looked at how designers were working, everybody would move their layers to the topmost section in the layer panel if it was a fixed element, right? And the reason they did that was so that as they scroll, these elements were on the top, the topmost layers, and everything scrolled beneath it. But then we've got so many immersive experiences like Parallax, where it's not just the objects on the top, but the objects at the bottom as well, or in the background that are fixed. So we said, how do we support that in XD? So to help with that, what we decided to do was we basically allow you to fix anything inside the file, even a background. And we don't actually automatically move the background to the top. We just keep it there. So for example, over here, I'm selecting the background image, saying fixed when scrolling. I hit preview and watch this. So now I can actually create some really, really expressive prototypes where it's not just content on the top, where it's not just content at the bottom, but pretty much giving you the liberty and the power to sort of control what elements move and what elements don't move. So really thinking about, even a small feature like fixed elements, but really pushing the boundaries in terms of what you can achieve with it. Anirudh, you got some magic?
Fixed, I'm good. You can move it.
I'm going to move on then. All right. He's saving the best for auto-animate. I can tell you that for sure. All right. Siri just fired up for some reason. No, I'm not talking to you. Let's see. What's the next one we want to do? Oh, let's do timed. So here I have an example of an onboarding flow. I put this together thinking, when someone launches the app, it shows them where the new features are. So I can go ahead, click on prototype. I'm going to get rid of these wires so that I can actually show you how I did this. Oh my God. Okay. Right. So here I have the first artboard. I'm going to go ahead, select this button, connect it out here, pick tap. I'm going to say simply transition, and I'm going to say dissolve. And then, okay, once that's done, now I'm going to select the next artboard. And what I want is for this artboard to automatically go from this state to the next state, because it's an onboarding flow. I don't want the user to have to click on something. So I'm going to go ahead, connect this, and now I'm going to select something called time. Time is a very simple trigger. It's controlled by two things, the delay and the duration. The delay represents the time you want it to wait before transitioning. The duration defines the time it requires to actually transition. So here I'm going to say I want it to wait for exactly 1 second and then take 0.8 seconds to go to the next screen. And I'm going to say dissolve. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing back here. And here's another little cool thing. XD remembers your last used values, so it makes it really quick to wire up a flow with the same thing. Now the beauty of this is I can actually create a loop. So from the last artboard, I'm going to bring it back to this one. And now when I actually preview this, the flow is pretty straightforward. I click once, and that's it. And now you'll see this prototype actually transition on its own after 1 second. And now it's quickly going to go through the rest of the screens, and it's going to keep looping back and forth. So this is how you could use time transitions in your prototype, where you quickly want to create a flow where the user does not have to actually interact. And you'll see how this example becomes even more better once we get to auto-animate.
Okay, I have an unrealistic example.
Okay, Anirudh's going to show us something totally unrealistic.
All right. So essentially, since you can hook up multiple artboards, you can essentially make anything. And one of our engineers built this.
I call this dev artwork.
Yeah, it's awesome. The other example for this is the shared prototype. You can actually see the cursor blink. So it feels like a real thing. So much so that if you load this URL on your phone and the address bar moves off, you try to interact with it as if it was an actual app.
All right. So, are we ready for auto-animate? Were you pumped about that feature when you saw it on stage? Okay. Yes. So, Anirudh's the brain behind that. He's done a lot of hard work with the rest of the team in building this amazing feature. And I think it's been one of the features that we worked on for the longest period of time, right? So when we thought about what does it mean for animation inside of XD, we set a couple of principles for ourselves. The first one was we want to do this in a way where users don't have to learn the tool. So traditionally, when you think of animation, the first thing that comes to mind is After Effects, Premiere Pro, keyframes. I don't want to do this anymore. But with XD, what we've tried to do is figure out ways in which you can achieve the same sort of experiences without actually having to understand or learn a lot about keyframes. So we started from there, we experimented, we spent a lot of time on research, and this is where we landed. So here, what I'm going to do is show you a quick example of how you build a flow. So I'm going to switch over to design mode. I'm going to copy this artboard. I'm going to paste it here. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. And now what I want to do is I want to create an example where clicking on this element basically fills up the whole screen. So how do you even approach doing something like this? The first step is you would create the end state. So, and the way we've observed designers doing this is they duplicate the artboard, they delete the stuff they don't need, they hide the stuff they don't need, and then they just work with the rest of it. So what you're about to watch is just me creating that end state, and I need both my hands for this, so I'm going to drop the mic. So I'm just going to delete a couple of layers out here, not that one. And then I'm going to reduce the opacity of this. And you can see as I'm resizing, how responsive resize is beautifully coming in to help me exactly when I need it. Like, I did not even have to think about how these things move. I just started resizing, and all of this works out of the box for me. So I'm going to go ahead, position this up back here. That looks good. I'm going to take this. Whoops. Bring this over here. Going to go ahead, resize this button a little bit. There we go. And anything else I want to do? Oh, maybe I'll adjust the mask. Maybe I'll bring this down a little bit. All right. So all I've done so far, that woke me up. All I've done so far is basically created the start state, the end state, and now I magically want to animate this. I mean, this is literally what designers told us. When we sat down in those meetings, going through research, sitting down with customers, they would do this and then be like, can you guys magically animate? Like somehow, like I just connected and you guys figure it out. And that was literally what we brought back to the team. We'd go out on weeks of research and they'd be like, what did you learn? And we're like, they said they want to magically make this happen. They're like, that's super helpful, right? We know exactly what they want now. So we took that challenge, right? We took it to heart and like we really spent a year thinking about what that means. So now you can simply go ahead, switch over to prototype mode, connect the wire, magically pick auto-animate because it's so easy. The rest of the functions are the same. Go ahead, click on the preview window, and boom. We magically animate between the start state and the end state of your artboard. Now, before I go into more really fun examples, I want to let Anirudh talk a little bit about what actually is happening. It's not really magic. It's a lot of hard work behind this. And I think some of this is important to understand in terms of how you can actually leverage this feature.
Awesome. All right. So Jonathan came back and said, he wanted magic. And at the same time, what I noticed was that, when designers were making stuff, there were these beautiful moments that only they experienced in the tool as they were resizing something or moving something around. The sense of playfulness when you put things onto the screen. And then we began thinking, what if that's all there is to animation? You guys design and we'll animate the changes. And to be very honest, it's not brand new. The concept is not really new. Keynote has done it. props where props is given. Keynote has magic move. But what if there was the full power of a visual design tool behind it? You make the changes, we animate. And as an example of the obsessive playfulness that I had seen.
By the way, this was one of the most distracting features. The minute one thing would start working, the whole XD team would stop working and just start playing with the feature. It was the hardest part of my job to make sure that they actually finished this feature and like didn't get distracted by playing with it.
Yeah. So back to that background blur example. Like if you as a designer grab this object and move it on the canvas right now, what you're seeing right now is also beautiful in a way. It's something that users will experience when they actually try out an iOS app. So now if you take that same thing, and I have an auto-animate sample here, and if you see, as I drag out, I can actually do this in the preview window. Now I can share this. I can record a video of this and share this. So you just make the designs, but you need to do certain things. And that certain things is as simple as preserving names and layer structure. So this is important. You know, every magic trick has some caveat, right? This is the caveat. I know designers aren't like obsessed with layer naming or anything like that. So again, we do some heuristics. We'll try and figure out stuff for you as much as possible. In most cases where I've seen, if you just copy your artboard around and move stuff, it's going to work. But in edge cases, as an engineer, I'm obsessed about edge cases. You will find that if you have a lot of rectangle ones and a lot of rectangle ones, there will be some mismatches you may notice. But we'll try and match for you. So names, layer structure, and type.
This was our way of getting you guys to name your layers right. We're like, it's about time. They need to name their layers. Let's give them a feature where they have no other option. They got to clean up that panel.
And I don't know if this came through when Jonathan was demoing it. He was actually using masking. He was changing paths. All these things you're used to in the design tool, but now you can animate them. When you move a mask, in animation terms, it's like panning. You can do zooming. Zoom is just resizing your objects, right? If you scale a vector object, that's zooming into it. So everything that's visual design, you can have an animation counterpart to it. And I have a lot of examples on this. So a quick one. This is like a player app, and a lot of the graphics are from Jonathan, but I butchered them. So I want you to notice a couple of things. The album artwork and the play button. Keep this in the center. Right. Now, if I hit play, you can see that the rectangle just like becomes a circle. The image is cleanly moving inside. The play button is morphing. It's splitting out into two lines to become a pause button. Again, when YouTube originally shipped this, I was like super obsessed about, as a design tool, we should be able to prototype this. More designers should be able to do stuff like this. And you don't need to be a pro animator to do this. If you can do visual design, we'll help you do this. So this is one of my favorite examples. Another one. This is a website, and this is an actual agency. So if the person's actually sitting here, I apologize in advance for butchering their site. So you have a hamburger menu, and I'm going to click on the lines. Watch the 3 lines. The 3 lines is going to become an X, and an actual rectangle with a gradient and opacity slides out. There's nothing else happening here. It's just a rectangle. I just moved it. In one case, it was off the artboard. In the other case, I moved it onto the artboard. And you can see, very simply, just dragging the lines. That's all I did. If I look at this example, there are 3 lines. Jump back into design mode. There are 3 lines. I just, grab them by the end and move them to make an X. That's it. And then you get this animation. So again, you don't have to think about animation unless the feature won't work for you. At that point, you will have to. When the feature works for you, it's just visual design becoming animation. And another fun example that I have, actually I have a lot of them, but one quick thing I wanted to touch into was spinners. So Jonathan, again, moved a lot of stuff around, right? But again, UX design, let's face it, a lot of us stare at spinners. Because of bad network, because of whatever reasons, you're going to see that spinner icon for some time. So rotation is special in auto-animate. You can build spinners very easily. And I'm going to build an unrealistic example first because those are way more fun. So I have a motorcycle. This is like a fully vector motorcycle. I'm just going to duplicate this artboard. And I click on this, and I'm just going to say 360 degrees here. So for animation, we introduced the fact that you can put 360 into the rotation field, even though visually you're not going to see it.
It's magic.
But now if you wire this, and I'm going to use time. So this is one way that I like to author animations. What I do is I wire up time and make sure I pick auto-animate. Let's increase the delay. Because we're making spinner, pretty much the easing has to be none. And you can already start to see it's starting to do some things. It's sort of,
That's how he comes to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like obsessed about motorcycles. So yeah, I've been making motorcycles spin and rotate and stuff like that. And you can see how auto-animate works with this example in a way. And I'm just going to move the bike around. And you can see now it's spinning into air. So this is probably how I come into office, driving in crazy like that. But again, if I switch back to design and just take away rotation, now it actually feels like the bike is moving. But I want the wheels to rotate now. So as long as I select the right object, and let's see. I have the wheel, yeah. I'm just going to pick 360 again. And I don't know if you can see, the front wheel is actually rotating. So there's a lot of stuff we do for you. Thanks. So you can apply rotation, movement, scale to any objects in the hierarchy. And we'll make sure the animation looks good, regardless of how it's structured, as long as the names match. And there's even more crazy examples I can do.
I want to do one more.
Yeah.
Let's do the monkey.
Oh, OK.
We got a good monkey example.
All right. Jonathan just called my Yeti a monkey. I'm offended.
Oh, okay, sorry, that's a Yeti. Fine, whatever.
Actually, it's not my Yeti. Again, I saw this on Twitter. Originally, I think I saw this on Dribble. Darren had made this login avatar animation. And then somebody made an SVG version of it. And I'm like, auto-animate has to allow you to make Yeti animations, for sure. It has to happen. So you can see there's a login screen here. And I'm going to tap into the email field. And you can see he sort of looks there. And the cursor is blinking again. That's a time loop. It's just a line going from opacity 1 to opacity 0, looping back and forth. But when you make a loop like that, you can always wire another trigger. In this case, I have the password field. So when I click the password field, it's going to exit the loop. And it's like, I don't want to look at your password. And this animation is beautiful. All props to Darren. He did a great job.
I mean, this is literally how we build the feature.
And one more fun animation. I think Damien is in the crowd, right? Damien built this. Again, watching somebody on Twitter. So you can see as I'm dragging, it's like the sort of checkbox you want to see early morning for an 8:15 a.m. session, right? Yeah, we're all here right now. All right.
Is my mic back on? All right, I want to show you one other quick example of auto-animate. So here, I have two artboards. You can see when I click on this, the images are actually one group. Then I've simply gone ahead and moved the image on the second one. And I'm being completely real. Look at my layer panel. Group 592. Like I started this file, God alone knows when. Like I've not even bothered to clean up my stuff, but it all works beautiful. So I have two artboards. I've taken the black button here and just zoomed into the whole thing and then wired it up to another bunch of screens. But watch what this prototype actually feels like. I'm going to go ahead. When I click on the arrow, watch how it actually transitions between the two screens using auto-animate. And then for the big reveal. So just another more complex example of how much you can push the boundary and the envelope with auto-animate. This was literally me just drawing a bunch of artboards, imagining the button would zoom in, and then it would take me to the next one. And I just wired it up, made a couple of tweaks, and it worked out of the box. So this is really how we've been imagining animation in XD. This is the tip of the spear. There's definitely a lot more coming in. I want to also cover two more features. So drag, and then we get to the fun bit with voice. So with gestures, we supported tap. We spoke about time. We're going to talk about voice in a bit, but drag is another really important one. When we spoke to customers about how they wanted to create a drag interaction, the answer was same. Like, I drag and it moves. Like, wasn't super helpful. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead, duplicate the artboard. Once I've done that, now I'm just basically going to set up my drag. Like, I want the second card to become big and the first card to move out. So I'm just going to quickly do that over here. I get 2 mics now. Okay. I don't remember which one. Hello? Okay, that's the right one. Okay, so all I've done is I've made some very basic changes. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is select this one, switch over to prototype mode, get rid of this. And I'm going to just connect it to this artboard and say drag. And then you see it automatically picks up auto-animate. So step 1, I've just selected drag. Now on this artboard, I want to make sure that when you click, like you try to drag that card, it goes back. So I'm going to select this card, wire it up back, and say drag again. That's all I did. And now watch this. In one single step, I'm able to actually prototype a drag interaction right inside of XD. Now, typically when you do this with other apps, you always have to define the drag start, the drag end, the duration of the drag, the mouse pointer. You got to do a lot of math, and it's tough and it's unwanted. So it was an opportunity for us again to really rethink how a simple step like this of creating a drag interaction could be simplified. So when you wire up the two artboards, we just take care of everything. We figure out where this object is on the previous artboard, where does your finger like start the drag from. When you release it, we determine how far have you progressed. So we either snap to the destination or we snap to the start. Like we do all the heavy lifting so that you could just quickly prototype something like a drag interaction. So this is a very quick example of drag right inside of XD, which for some reason just, oh, there we go. And then, Anirudh, did you have something you wanted to take us through? No.
Again, this is one of my favorite animation examples. Again, very realistic. You have a list, and if I click and hold the mouse down here, and as I move, you can see, you can do a swipe to delete, swipe to delete, swipe to archive, swipe to bring up more actions. It's pretty common now. And these are two artboards, right? In the second artboard, the item has just been moved to the left. But you don't have to say drag left. You don't have to say where drag starts. We just figure out based on the object you wired. So if you look back at my prototype, it is actually, you can see, oh, I've just moved that rectangle out. It's as simple as that. Again, very visual. If you can visually move the same object, we'll figure out stuff for you. So in this case, there's also a trick. I wanted to delete afterwards. So what I've done is, there's a wire here. That is basically a time transition. And it has that item, again, just going away. All right, very quickly. So yeah, if I go back to the full animation, I'm going to swipe, and I'm going to release this. If you see, when you release midway, we will complete the animation for you and move on to the next transition. So I'm going to leave my mouse up, and it's going to, move away and then collapse, just like in real world. So if you mouse up, the animation moves to the end.
All right, I want to give you one little pro tip before we move on to voice. So here I have, oh God. Here I have an example that I have already wired up, and watch how it works. So go back here. I'm dragging between the two cards. Then I click on this, it zooms in. Click, you see this slide up. I basically put together an entire flow which is a combination of tap, drag, transition, auto-animate, time-based triggers, all of that beautifully coming together to help me create like the most realistic flow. But there's one small detail. If you observe when I transition from this screen to the next one, you see the little seating thing jump up. You see it almost like sequence the animation. Now we don't have a timeline yet, but how did I do that? So here's a small little trick. On this previous artboard, I actually have all of these circles right there, but they are at the bottom, positioned way off the artboard, and I've hidden the opacity. And I've set the duration such that by the time it actually transitions, those objects are actually animating from outside my artboard back onto the artboard. So that's a really small little trick to like control the sequencing in your animation, but it helps you create some really fun, realistic experiences. All right, so we could go on for auto-animate, but let's go to the other big thing, which was voice. Now, with voice, we basically wanted to set the stage with allowing you to prototype for experiences that we've never even imagined, and voice is just one of those. So we've been thinking about what does it mean to prototype for devices like the Echo Show, where you have a screen as well as it's a speaker, but voice is your primary input and touch is your secondary input for those devices. So here, all you have to do is basically, I'm going to switch over to a different file. I'm going to go ahead over here and select this first artboard, which is the screen of my Echo Show. I'm going to connect a wire. And at this point, I basically want to tell the screen that launch the Reel app. So when I pick voice, I go ahead, type something like launch Reel. And then I'm just going to say auto-animate. So this beautifully works with auto-animate as well. That's all I had to do to create a voice trigger. Now I go back to the preview window. Once I have the preview window open, all I have to do is hold down spacebar and speak the command. What did I type?
Launch Reel.
Oh, right. Launch Reel. And you can see it was as easy as that to actually prototype a voice trigger inside of XD. Now, designing for voice is a two-way interface, right? You don't just talk, but the screen or the interface has to respond back. So for example, when it transitions to this screen, I wanted to play back some audio. So to do that, one of the last options in this menu was speech playback. So I'm going to say, welcome to Reel. And the beauty of this is, whoops, what am I doing? Over here. Welcome to Reel. And I'm also going to set the trigger as time. So I wanted to transition from the first screen to the second screen based on my voice input. And then based on a specific time duration delay, it's going to play back some audio. So I wanted to do this instantly, so it's 0 seconds. And then I say, welcome to Reel. And let's look at the flow once more. See, this is the hardest part of doing the demo. I forget what I've typed. Launch Reel. It's 2 words, but still. I've been saying stuff like open Reel and it's not been working for like several demos. Launch Reel. Oh, shoot. Oh, but you guys get the point, right? My speaker's muted. It's actually going to play, but there's no fun. We're going to turn on the speaker. That's not fair. All right, let's do this. Where's my sound? All right. Interesting. Oh, it's actually picked up the output speakers. Let's try that once more. It worked before we started. Launch Reel. Launch Reel. Do we have, not sure why we're not getting any audio output from here. That's a bummer. Alright.
Just use your internal speakers. Put the mic down.
Okay. We're going to go old school.
Yes.
This has been the most fun session with a mic ever. Launch reel.
To reel.
Okay, we're going to do that once more. All right, so here's, I've put together an entire flow just to save time, but check this out. Alexa, launch reel.
Welcome to reel. What would you like to do?
Which movies are playing at the studio today?
We've got Sparrow by John Knight and Lake Merck by Mary Newcomb playing at the studio. Which one would you like to see?
Let's go with Sparrow. Let's go with Sparrow.
Would you like to book tickets for today?
Yes, 2 tickets for Sparrow, please.
If you're happy with the selection, go ahead and say confirm.
Yes, confirm these 2 tickets.
Your tickets are confirmed. Enjoy the show, Jonathan.
So, here's just a quick glimpse of what you could do with voice. One of my favorite things to do with voice is knock knock. Really? Wait. Am I on the right artboard? Yeah. Knock knock. Oh, come on. This is embarrassing.
Voice prototypes are the hardest to demo.
Anyways, you guys are not going to see my Britney Spears joke. But you could totally imagine creating a whole bunch of voice prototypes, sending it to your stakeholders, making them have to go through the pain of speaking through the prototype. But really, I mean, jokes aside, voice is pretty powerful. Bringing that together with some of the stuff we've shown you around tap, drag, time can really help you create some powerful prototypes in XD. And then the last thing I want to leave you all with is how do you guys learn more about this stuff? So instead of pointing you to like a resource page, I want to introduce you to two folks on my team who've been creating a lot of amazing content. Definitely check out the work that Howard is doing. Amazing set of videos. Yeah, go ahead, click a picture. 2018, we don't know how to share links yet. I'm waiting to like get to a point where we support URLs inside of XD, so then I can just share the prototype and you can click on it. And then the other one is Danny. Danny's a part of the XD team as well, and she creates a lot of good video content. And this is not just for prototyping, but overall XD. So design, prototyping, all of that. Now, with that said, I just have 2 last comments and then we can all leave. First one, if you have any questions, come find us at the XD booth in the community pavilion or at the XD plugin booth. We are out of time, unfortunately, so I can't do a Q&A. And then the other thing is, one of the things that helps us create these sessions for you is getting your feedback. So it's very important for me and Anirudh to know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, what we could do better. So I'd encourage all of you all to please take the survey because we actually go back and read all of it. So it would be tremendously helpful to know what kind of content is more helpful for future sessions. But that's about it. You guys have been amazing. Enjoy the rest of your week out here and have a great time at the Max Bash today. Thank you.